actually, we had from our meeting last night. I would say that the majority of clubs were ambivalent to the structure as long as we got the merger done or integration done. So we got more of a steer towards their feeling towards the actual integration of the OCA clubs, where on the whole everybody was in favour. When it came to the vote around the structure, there were a couple of people were in favour of one, a couple of people in favour of the other, and then quite a few said, well, actually, we don't really care, but if you push us, we'll go this way, or we'll push us, we'll go that way. So we took that, away from that is that if we go back and then start to discuss with the OCA further, if everybody's in agreement in this forum, then we will take that forward. If it becomes a showstopper, then we will then negotiate with the OCA to see if we can remove any roadblocks.
There might be the need for discussion with our own clubs. That's sort of where I'm just a bit concerned, that if you don't get a good enough consensus, whether I'm just interested in whether clubs might.
Okay, so from our consensus from last night, I would say that we would be in a good position.
Okay.
I think the other thing
there was a reasonably good reaction to splitting those two things, so that yes, do we want to integrate with the OCA? Yes, and then secondly, as Dave said, which is people's preferred format, and everybody's got a view on that, and that would be secondary to getting the position where those lower divisions were regionalised, and we had some strong clubs coming in with good facilities that would hopefully push into those top divisions in later years. So the two things, whilst not completely separate, don't have to be an all or nothing.
I wondered if the clubs here, so my last one, I wondered if the clubs here tonight, who've expressed views on the structure, are thinking, well, if the structure we prefer is not accepted, we might not come in or might not vote for the integration.
Well, sorry, can I just say something and I'll come back to you? One of the things that we are very keen to put in place here is a 2-year review on all aspects of the integration, because there will be things that we will learn in the first season and perhaps in the second half of the second season. And so we wanted to put on the timeline a structural review of everything, probably starting midway through the second season, where we would come back and revisit things that had perhaps been considered and or rejected, or things that we have adopted, and whether we consider them to be a success or not. Now, obviously, on the ongoing running of the league, everyone has that capacity to be able to table something from the floor at an AGM to change something. But we want to put that in as something to be expected, that we need to review what we've been doing, because we will not get everything right. We're bringing together best part of 5,000-6,000 cricketers potentially. There's bound to be some things that don't quite run the way we expect them to run. And so this review period would be guaranteed to happen, so that if people did come and go, well, much rather be doing it this way or that way, then there's a sort of trial period that we go through, and then a chance for everyone to come back and talk through what they believe has been good, what they believe has not been so good, and should we be looking at perhaps some alternative ways of doing it. Sorry, Dave.
Sorry, now I just really want to respond to John's question by saying, from my recollection last night, nobody last night said something that, as Simon said in his opening statement, that the structure was a deal breaker. Everyone last night seemed to be of the opinion that the deal needed to be done. How we structured it was, I think they actually used the term, they put their trust in the committee to come up with what they think will suit us best. That was the terms used last night.
Yeah, there was one club that sat on the fencing.
I didn't mean to say absolutely a deal breaker. Our committee and many of the players whom we spoke to very keen on the integration, and the second team players who have certainly this season had to make hugely long journeys virtually every week in the last 3 or 4 weeks, hugely in favour of the regionalisation of the lower divisions. But there was also a strong feeling that for a small and aspirational club like us, the flatter structure was much better because it gave us more of an incentive, and our players more of an incentive, more of a target, and that, frankly, we were concerned that the more streamlined structure, the alternative one, might lead to small clubs like us losing some our better players to go to bigger clubs. And again, I would argue very strongly that would not be good for the whole of cricket in Oxfordshire. And I also want to come back to the fact is there are the clubs from the OCA joining would similarly want to aspire to be able to play in higher divisions, and the flatter structure gives them that opportunity in the future. All I'm saying is the feeling in the club was fairly strong about this. So I would feel, and the steer was that I'd have to go back to poll the members, further down the road when it became clear what the structure was.
Okay. Anything incoming from anyone we haven't spoken with or haven't heard from yet?
Hi.
Hi, Paul.
We would go to a membership to
Yeah, we're struggling with it, Paul. You're breaking up.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
As a board, we discussed it. We would probably go to our I think.
I'm sorry, we're not getting you at all here. Certainly I'm not. I don't know if anyone else is.
Nope.
No.
No. Pete, are you on the line? Can you think what Paul's talking about?
I am here, but obviously not sitting on the Long Marston board. I can't speak on their behalf of what their conversations have been, unfortunately.
Are you ringing?
I
could ring him and find out what he wants to say and then come back.
It's probably not a bad plan because I think internet in Long Marston is struggling a bit.
No, mate, he's in the beautiful Pitstone like myself. Mine works all right. He's obviously with a poor provider.
Okay, well, that sounds like an internal club thing. We'll just let you.
He is muted at the moment, by the way.
Oh, he is at the moment. Yeah.
That's like you're in the outback, Pete.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me put that question another way. Is there anyone we haven't heard of who's got a decent internet connection who would like to contribute something?
I'll try. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good, Julian. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we found, like, with the first team, we want to try and play the best cricket. And that is why we go with your view to have the split leagues early on to give them a chance of playing the best cricket they can. But this is obviously as our club. And then lower down for the second team, especially with a lot of youngsters coming through, the regionalised is a lot better for us. So it sort of keeps the gap not as far apart, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to put some realism within the regionalisation, absolutely there's every intention to try and regionalise. But if you look at a map with Chilwell and OCA clubs, don't expect every game to be 2 minutes drive down the road. There will still be some longer games, but there will be less of them. And we would expect to cut out the really long ones, the Wantage to the other, to Brackley type of, Challow to Brackley type of games. But it doesn't mean that every game will be on your doorstep, but more will, and more will be close. And I think we've done some calculations. We'd hope that the average travel time was 25 minutes or something. But don't, if this goes through and we get the fixtures out for next year, don't come running back and say, oh, we thought you regionalised it. Why have we got to go there? Because the practicality and the spread of the teams dictates that it isn't possible across all tiers to get everything as regionalised as possible, which I think we've tried to do this year, and that's again proven that sometimes you'll find yourself driving past another ground who might be in the same tier as you, and you think, well, why am I not in my tier? But the alternative would be that some teams would be severely disadvantaged and have lots of travel. So we will try and average it out across a tier. So there will still be some longer games, but nothing like as many.
I think it's quite important to manage that expectation, as Gary said, and I think the overall way I look at it is it's not actually about where you play, it's about where you don't. And it takes out the real pain from travelling, and it thus allows you to have a much better season where you would look. And I'm sure we've all done it, particularly if you're playing in some of the lower divisions. You look down, you go, well, I've got 9 games at home, I've got 2 games local, I've got 2 games not too far away, and I need a travel agent for the other 3 or 4. And we want to cut that out as much as we possibly can. But as we said right from the start, you will not be walking to 9 away games, because that's just not feasible, given we've got 80 clubs across 2,000 square miles. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, when we discussed it with our committee, I think broadly in favour of the merger. I mean, I think as much as anything, there seems not a great deal of point in having 2 leagues anyway. It kind of, the broad idea of having 2 leagues into one makes a great deal of sense. I think there is a concern over grounds. I think that's pretty natural. I think I don't know how the General League would propose to deal with 40 clubs coming in and actually really be able to, I suppose, look at every ground in detail. I mean, it's as much as anything that is more of a concern for the kind of 3rd team, the younger cricketers who are obviously looking to kind of learn the game and play on, reasonable grounds. I think that's probably the only real concern. And then I think as far as the structure goes, probably echo what others say, pretty relaxed. I think we seem to prefer the alternative structure. I mean, having just kind of got promoted from Division 4, I suppose it doesn't make a huge deal of difference, but I think maybe just that kind of flat 1, 2 and 3 seem to be favoured for us. And that's about it for us, I think.
I think as well, it's worth mentioning that in the conversations we've already had with the OCA committee, they have, as do we, a list of target grounds that they think need work, and so they're doing the same work we're doing. And I think maybe when we were speaking to them 5 years ago, there was certainly a preconception in the Cherwell League that OCA means poor ground standards. Now, I don't know whether that was true or not at the time, but it's certainly not at this stage. I think that, we've looked at the 6 teams that have expressed an interest in coming across, and their ground standards are absolutely on a par with what would be required for divisions 5, 4 and 3 easily. We've got no issues with that. You'd kind of expect that, I suppose, at the top level. But as I say, talking to their committee, they know where there are issues with grounds, and they threw a team out from their 3rd division last season because of persistently poor pitch marks and facilities availability. That team's now come back to them and said, we want to come back. We've got the list you gave us. We've checked off these boxes. And in the conversation we had with them, they said, would you be all right about us bringing them back in, subject to us going along and making sure that they have hit all the targets that we set them. So the procedure is being mirrored across the 2 leagues.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is some of the more problematical grounds for everybody are second grounds for teams. It's quite hard, obviously, unless you're lucky like Didcot to be given 2 grounds to have that second ground. And there are only about 3 OCA clubs with 3 teams, so that wherever you're playing on their main ground, which typically means that it's much easier for them to improve. It's much easier for it to be a nice ground, and therefore I don't think it is a bit of a perception that it will make in those lower tiers where the majority of those OCA clubs will go. I don't think the ground standards will drop, and where they do, we reserve the right with the OCA to make sure those teams are not allowed to come up the tiers until they meet the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of snobbery on the ground standards. I mean, I think that kind of came through in our committee. I mean, we actually played at West Witney from Whitney Swifts earlier this year, and we're kind of pretty happy with the pitch. Thought it played fine, you know, better than other grounds we played at recently. And the third team are using OCA grounds, 2 or 3 OCA grounds this year in their kind of nomadic first year. And Stonesfield is probably as good a ground as they'll play on. So I think there is a bit of a snobbery, but I guess it's just that kind of, there's always going to be a bit of concern about grounds, and that's what we get a bit from the committee at the moment.
Yeah, and then Jim's working really hard with Owen to make sure that we have graded everybody and we've overcome that when we get there. But as Ian said, they're very realistic about the standard of some of their grounds in the same way that we'd like to be.
John, you were waving at me.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate things like actual the pitches or the squares might, you know, in some cases take a little bit of time to bring up to standard, albeit I accept entirely what Ben says about they're probably better than people have assumed. But will there be minimum standards on certain things, like at least 1 sight screen at each end and a set of covers? Because I think that however much a ground and its wicket or its square may need bringing up to standard, I think certain things need to be in place, such as the 2 I mentioned, and maybe
the OCA ground standards already mandate covers and sight screens at all grounds.
Right.
So actually, they're ahead of us in that respect.
Yeah.
Could we introduce that to the Cherwell League then?
I think that's probably a very, very good idea, and I would support that fully. Yeah, absolutely. We've been able, you know, as Ian said early on, we as a bigger group, we will have more, hopefully, collective bargaining power with where we need to for getting sight screens in place and the like.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm trying to monitor 25 of you, 30 of you, in fact, on one screen. So I'm not missing anyone who's waving madly at me.
Yeah, Ian, I'm looking at screen 2. If you look at screen 1.
Okay.
I can feed back if you want what Paul Marsh was going to say.
Yeah, please, crack on.
So having just spoken to him, basically what he said was, you know, as a club, we'd probably favour the current Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 as they are, and then regionalising lower than that, just as a standpoint. And again, it kind of falls back onto that same mandate that you talked about earlier. You know, having a side already in those top divisions means we're less likely to have the necessity to have a flatter structure. But it wouldn't be a stickling point, I don't think, for us in terms of voting. And the other thing was, he said that obviously once the papers came out and stuff, they would go to the playing group to get mandate to then obviously vote on their behalf at a Cherwell League meeting.
Okay.
That was basically it.
Excellent. Well, I mean, the purpose of these forums is to give us guidance and really a mandate to continue the discussion and guidance on perhaps no-go areas or must-go areas from the Cherwell League point of view, so that when we come back, the detailed document might not necessarily have 100% of the things that you would like to have in it, but it will all be represented by kind of the majority view or the groundswell view that we've taken from here. Plus, of course, we are negotiating with another body. Now, we made it very clear to the OCA right from the outset that we weren't looking to merge 2 sets of rules, 2 sets of constitutions, playing formats, etc. It was very much the Cherwell League, as it is happy to welcome the OCA. but there will have to be some accommodations. So, for example, one-team clubs, which is not something that we have a facility for within the Cherwell League, but we would see absolutely no sense in proposing bringing the OCA in and barring 20 of the clubs. That would be ridiculous. The idea is to get more cricket played, not less. So we would accommodate on that. Any sort of physical sticking points like that obviously has to be worked around. But for the most part, it is the structure that you're used to playing in that is looking to welcome 75 teams, not tear it up, start again, and create a new jigsaw.
And just to say, having been part of the meetings, if that's what we can call them, the first time around when this was discussed 5 years or so ago, they've been incredibly positive and incredibly supportive of all the things we've suggested. I mean, last time around, we'd barely sat down and ordered our beer when we met them before the meeting was over. This time, they've been incredibly supportive. We've spoken, a small number of us have spoken to their whole committee on a Zoom call last month and answered any questions they had. And again, the overall feeling was that they were supporting this and they were realistic. And with a view of what's best for cricket, they absolutely were in favour from a committee point of view.
Maybe I should just say something around one-team clubs. So in the past, we've always insisted on having clubs with at least 2 teams in the league. And from that perspective, everybody gets 1 vote. However, if we have a one-team club in the league, we're proposing that the voting structure change slightly. So a one-team club will get 1 vote, and a 2-team club or 2 or more club will get 2 votes at the any discussions and meetings moving forward. This is something similar to something that's used in the Thames Valley, where their one-team clubs are called associate clubs, and their voting rights aren't quite the same as the full member clubs.
Is Mr. Rolfe again?
Yeah, just a general question really on umpires. I wonder, do the OCA have a lot of panel umpires? I mean, umpires, it's always an issue, isn't it? You know, there aren't as many people prepared to stand as they used to be, and it's not just for the committee, this one, it's for everybody really, whether you know, they feel that more umpires are willing to stand than before. But I'm particularly interested in whether the OCA have got a whole bank of panel umpires, or whether they rely mostly on club umpires, or whether it's a mix.
The current regulations in the OCA require that all teams supply a neutral umpire to another game in the OCA. So they have a wider spread of neutral non-playing umpires than we do. There are some concerns within the OCA committee as to how many of those are still going to be around post-COVID. And I don't mean how many of them are going to drop dead. I mean how many of them are still going to want to be involved. Our view on this at the moment is that we really need to get information back from both umpires coordinators as to what they think the position would be in terms of the number of available umpires, and from there we can make a sensible decision on exactly how it would go. The structure that we put in place is one which would allow for any team that has a neutral or non-playing umpire who wants to nominate them to the panel could be nominated to the panel. No umpire would go without a game if they wanted one. And that team would in return receive the neutral umpire back from a panel. But we've tried to leave the structure as flexible as possible until we know what the resources actually are going forward. Experience within talking to people within the Cherwell League is that it's getting increasingly hard for clubs to find umpires. Some clubs prefer the idea that they can maintain a club umpire rather than a neutral umpire, but we don't want to put this into engrave this in stone at this stage. We need to know exactly what the resources are that we've got, and then we can make something that's sensible and workable.
Ian, it's Paul Marsh. Hope you can hear me now.
Ah, much better, Paul. Yeah,
loud and clear.
This might be too far ahead, but have you given any thought to the sort of structure of the committee of the new league? If it was adopted, would their committee members come onto your committee, or do you envisage that it would be status quo and you guys would run the new league as you do the existing one?
I'll give this one to Dave.
Yes, so we have considered what the structure would look like. Obviously, with 170 sides in a league, it's considerably more. So we think that we'd probably expand our committee by about 4 members. We would. We have talked to the OCA around running their cup competitions. So we might have a subcommittee for cup competitions. These would be run on a Sunday or even midweek, maybe. Additionally, we'd be looking at putting some regional representatives in place that maybe look after 20 clubs or 15 clubs, and they can then report to into the committee. If you know, if you have one person who looks after, say, 20 clubs that are local to them, you know, things that crop up on a day-to-day basis, generally they get sent to Ian or myself. That could go through a local person, and then they could filter that through to the committee.
But basically, the senior positions on the committee at the moment, you wouldn't see them changing with an influx of OCA committee members.
That's not. So
yeah, go on.
So our proposal to the OCA to ask them if they wanted to join us was that playing formats would remain the same, constitution would remain the same, committee would remain the same. However, we do expect it to be expanded. Now, those seats will be available for anybody who wants to sit on the committee. There might be people from the OCA are keen to continue as an administrator in cricket. There might be people on the Chilwell League that decide that they don't want to continue any further. So, you know, like at any AGM, there might be seats available for anybody, and it will be open to any member of the league, as it is now. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, right.
Adrian, I saw you waving at me.
Yeah, I missed the first bit of the meeting, I'm afraid, but you might have covered this already. Bearing in mind that with COVID, this has been a particularly difficult year. We'll have to expand on that. You're proposing some really radical changes here. And is the timescale to introduce this for next season really realistic? Wouldn't you trying to rush all these changes with formats, structures, leagues, committees, umpires, and grounds, etc.? Is it really a realistic thing to? We don't really know what sort of the cricket world is going to be, let alone the rest of the world by spring next year. Is it just too much change, not quite at the right time?
Well, obviously we don't think so, and one of the reasons that we're confident with it is because although on the face of it, it looks like a lot of change, most of the structure, the formats, the playing formats, playing rules, etc., will be exactly the same for us. There will be, I think, a more challenging integration perhaps for the OCA clubs, because there are more changes for them. We've had discussions now with a subcommittee from the OCA and the full committee of the OCA over the last 6 or 8 weeks, and I mean the reason that we didn't involve our membership straight away is because we had to find out if there was any appetite whatsoever. If the OCA were going to say not interested, then there was really little point in us debating it at any length. So a lot of it is in principle in place. There is detail to be thrashed through, for sure, but we're pretty confident that that detail can be achieved quite quickly. We also felt that to start the conversation now, engage everyone at this level now, and then say it's a 2022 start, kind of kills next season stone dead for everyone, because there are a whole bunch of teams who would look at the potential structure and say, well, we're playing for absolutely nothing, because if we win the division, we'll be at this level. If we lose the division, we'll be at this level. And it just puts us in a bit of a hiatus year. This year gave us the opportunity to not have to wait to the end of the season to understand where our clubs were, relatively speaking, because we're going to use the end of 2019 as the guide. So it seemed that, yeah, that timescale is challenging, but realistic.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, we've actually had more time to consider this because we haven't been playing as much cricket as we would have done in a normal year. So, and as Ian said, next year would be, if you've got 3 divisions going into a tier, most teams actually have got nothing to play for the whole year. And we felt that, particularly with the number of OCA clubs who we would then have to have dealt with their admissions next year anyway, it may have left the OCA and some of those clubs very much more vulnerable if we left it any longer. But it is quite a lot of work. No one's disputing that. But an awful lot of it has been done over the last 2.5 months.
Sorry, okay, I'll come in. I think this natural break is the ideal time to actually do this restructuring. And for example, doing the when we had made the decision to go and restructure our season, when we got the green light to go, we were able to do that because we were building on the structure that we'd already put in place for next year that we were working on. So we already had the tier bases in our mind, so it was easy to just move on and go from that.
I'd be quite interested to hear any comments from our more recently arrived ex-OCA teams. Tim, we heard a few words from you earlier. Richard, you know, as a club that has recently moved across from the OCA to the Chadwell League, be interested in your thoughts.
Hi, Richard Chadwell from Westbury. Yeah, you know, I think you're being quite kind allowing 5 OCA teams quite so high, having in the past when we came in, you had to be champions. We've been fortunate enough to move up the leagues, but one of those seasons was a season finishing second. This is until you get to Division 3 now on one of the systems. Other than that, you've got to be champions. I think we're being kind to the OCA here. Whether the standard, I'd like to think the better clubs have already come out. I think we might be putting a few of them too high.
Okay.
Can I come in on that one?
Yeah, indeed.
Well, I agree with Richard because we followed them up, I think, the year after at Minster. And I think the alternative proposal is going to be far better in our club's mind than the original proposal, purely because of the standard of the OCA as it stands. I think somebody mentioned earlier on that there would be no higher than Division 4 or the tiers.
5. Well, the equivalent of our current Division 5 would be the highest any of them would be.
Yes.
So Jim, I just come back there. So it won't actually affect you or the other clubs because who are in Division 1 to 3. So if it remains the same, you'll still be in Division 1 to 3. If we change it so it's Division 1 and 2A, 2B, it will still be the top 30 clubs will still be in there. So they don't actually affect your position. And the OCA clubs will come in at either Tier 3, where there'll be 2 divisions of 10, or Tier 4, where there'll be 2 divisions of 10. So it doesn't actually impact anything at the top end of the league.
And actually, both of you clubs are really good examples of the fact that actually there'll be some levelling out, we suspect. I mean, you both probably got players back who were playing Chilwell League cricket because they wanted to play at a high standard. When you were part of the Chilwell League, they came back to you. And I know certainly in a number of clubs that's been the case when they've joined us. So we'd expect some strengthening of those clubs, as both of you have clearly done quite significantly since you joined.
I wasn't actually talking about ourselves on where we are in the league, because we have 3 teams which range from 3 down to 9. I was hoping to sort of represent the whole structure, as it were, and feeling that the alternative proposal would be a lot easier for the OCAs coming in to the Chilwell League.
So talking to the OCA, in any negotiation, you have to have some compromise. Their opinion of the standard of their cricket is probably higher than our opinion of the standard of their cricket. Maybe there is a middle ground somewhere where it sits. So when we say as a collective Chilwell League, well, we don't think you're any better than Division 5 or Division 6, their opinion is that they're Division 3 or Division 4. So having the tiered structure where they come in gives them an opportunity to either progress or stay within that middle ground in that league.
In terms of where we're putting them now, we have kind of progressively moved this down a little bit. So when Mr. Lovell, Westbury and Charlbury all came in, you all came in at Division 4, I think. Now, obviously, Westbury and Mr. Lovell have moved on. Charlbury have not. The proposal this time is that we are accepting that we think the best 3 teams in the last 5 years are already out. So we're starting them at 5. And the base formula is basically, and this is a very rudimentary formula, but whatever your OCA division is, add 4, that's roughly where we see you fitting into the Chilwell League, which is a little bit bigger gap than it was perhaps when your teams came in. So I think where we're more concerned, to be honest, is in tiers 5 and 6, because that's where we really don't know the strength of the teams against the strength of our teams. I think at the top end, we're reasonably comfortable. If we give 5 of them an opportunity and 2 of them get relegated, well, okay, we possibly did overplace them. But only 2 of them can come down, and we're fairly confident at least 2 of them will be pretty competitive. But as Roger said earlier, these things have a way of sorting themselves out pretty quickly. And as long as we put enough flexibility into the movement system, we will get to a position where people are playing at the right level, probably within 2 years. But no, certainly points noted. Simon.
So just picking up on Dave's point then that he just made. So obviously we're giving an indication of where we feel as a group of clubs in the Chilwell League. If for it doesn't hypothetically we choose structure A or B, doesn't matter. How does that go if the OCA are not in favour of the structure that we as a group of clubs end up voting? What happens then? Do the OCA have a favoured structure given what you're saying about their opinion of their abilities? And is this futile because we'll end up agreeing or arguing about a structure that ultimately has to be compromised to proceed with the integration of the OCA into our league?
So we're hoping that taking away from the 2 forums from yesterday and today, that we have a mandate to go and negotiate with the OCA in bringing this together for hopefully for the good of local cricket
and
within the region.
And because neither of those 2 structures directly affect the OCA clubs as of now, it isn't really something they've expressed any preference for or any concern around. They've seen the lower tiers, they've seen where their clubs would notionally fit, but they haven't expressed interest one way or the other, because they appreciate that they're, as of now, any of their clubs are probably 2 years off being affected by those top 3 divisions, however they're split. So
Yeah.
it isn't going to change, as far as we're aware, and certainly in our conversations, it's not going to change any of their views on coming and joining us.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that we've only put the proposal 1 to them, and we haven't put the proposal 2 to them. So, so from their perspective, they're closer to the top in proposal 1 than they would be in proposal 2. So that might actually, they might come back and say, actually, we don't like that. Now we're trying. So the proposal we're putting together, you know, it's a combination of speaking to a lot of people over several years. So there are compromises, there are things that people do like and what they don't like. What we're trying to do is get everybody on board so they like enough of it to vote for it. Obviously, we need to also do the same for the OCA, that they like enough of it that they vote for it to come on board. If we can't, then it won't happen. If we say, actually, we like all of this, but the OCA go, well, actually, 50% of our clubs like it and 50% don't, it won't go forward. You know, their voting structure is the same as ours. They need 2/3. So we need to make sure that we appeal to at least 2/3 of their clubs to come and join us. Now, if we have to concede on some points, there are a few points in there that we're willing to concede on. There are things that we won't concede on, and we believe that the points that we won't concede on, they've already agreed to. Things like the structure, potentially is something that could be negotiated. Also, umpires potentially could be something that is negotiated, although they might actually increase our panel pool of umpires. That makes it easier for us to fill slots, but at this moment in time, we don't know. To answer your point, yes, it could cause an issue, but we hope that after talking to everybody, that we'll have a mandate to go away and be able to negotiate that.
One interesting point that came up in conversation with them is that, as Dave mentioned, if you speak to an individual OCA club, particularly one in the higher echelons of Division 1, they will tell you where they think they would fit in the Cherwell League. When you speak to the OCA committee, their opinions are much more in line with Richard and Tim's, that they worry about their teams being placed too high. So you have there's almost a compromise position going to occur between the club's own aspirations. And when when an OCA club approaches us and says, we'd like to come in, we have a look at the facilities and go through the procedures, and then they say, well, we think we should be in it in 3 and 6, we don't negotiate. We say, no, you'll be coming in at 5 and 8. And they say, well, we think we should be at least in 4. Sorry, which part of 5 and 8 wasn't clear? That's where you're coming in. It's not up for negotiations. And if you've got enough, you'll get up to 4. And actually, in a sense, we would rather them be low than high when it's a new team coming in rather than 75 teams coming in, because we don't actually want people to join the league and then get smashed down a division. We'd much rather they came in, did well, and found their level. It's a big challenge placing the teams, we know that. And we think that the only way we can put a defendable proposal together is not to try and judge individual teams, but to make a judgment about how you integrate 2 leagues together. And the way we're looking at that at the moment is we've ranked the Cherwell teams from 1 to 102. We've ranked the OCA teams from 1 to 75. And the decision we make then is, where does 1 in the OCA equate to in the Cherwell League? And we've equated it to around 45. And said from there, we can draw lines and make divisions. It's arbitrary, we know that, but it at least has a defendable logic behind it, which then will work its way through in the first 2 seasons as they play each other, and as the cricket will decide in the end.
And as we get lower down, then geography plays an increasing part in that as well. I mean, do you want to go a long, long way, or perhaps have a couple of not quite so competitive games, but be closer to home. And that's lower down. The message we've been having is that geography is more important to some extent, although not an overriding, all-encompassing argument.
Mr. Pryor.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued to ask Roger and anyone else who's from the kind of the northeast of this of our region. One of the problems we've had with regionalisation is, excuse the dog. One of the problems we've had with making regionalisation effective is we've got far greater numbers in West Oxfordshire and South Oxfordshire than we have further up towards Milton Keynes. A lot of the clubs up your way, Roger, kind of who are in our league, and sorry, later buzzer, Dan's here somewhere, play their third or fourth teams in local leagues there. Would this setup encourage you to bring those into the Cherwell League and allow us to regionalise more effectively at lower levels?
It all started, we joined the Cherwell League. We put 3 teams in, but we found it very difficult to go from Milton Keynes to Wantage and beyond. and in the end, a third team almost collapsed. So we decided to come out of the Cherwell League for our third team and go into the local league. I personally think that we might only be in the middle of the integration exercise. I still think there's a long way to go. My personal opinion, as I expressed to him, was we should have been doing this 20 years ago, and we tried very hard to try and make it happen a bit. And all the leagues, all the smaller leagues, got very, very defensive indeed, even to the notion. So I think this is a giant leap forward, and I think maybe the 4 counties league might become part of something as we go forward. You know, it's the counties. In the end, the county structure cannot be ignored because that's where the boards sit, and all of the work that the boards do fits into the counties. So if the 4 counties league, which includes Buckinghamshire and Bedfordshire clubs, and 1 or 2 other peripherals, then this might be the start of a bigger integration, and I'm all in favour of that because I think cricket has got to sort itself out, and you can't have leagues effectively competing for clubs. I think we've done that, Rupert, haven't we? Rupert was there at the time, and it was pretty hard, I have to say. As you will all have realised, it has settled down, and I think that we really do, as a sport, have to be sure that any club can aspire to be part of a Premier League, providing they meet all of the requirements for ground facilities, for whatever, not just hire a few guns and make a great team. So yeah, I think it would be better for us, and it will encourage us to look more closely. You know, getting a third team with 2 old blokes and 9 kids to go 70 miles is impossible, as we found out. We took some dreadful teams where, you know, we were counting the limbs rather than the cricketing ability, and making sure that 11 sorts of individuals went onto a cricket field. So yeah, it's bound to help. I think if this does happen, and I'm very strongly in favour of it because of past history, we would move forward and further integrate and bring the 4 counties and maybe even the mid-buck, who knows, leagues into one unified structure. So yeah, it helps.
Oh, yeah, I'd say as Long Marston, obviously we probably as far away from the Oxfordshire as you can get, and we do run our third team in the Cherwell at the moment. I guess one of our concerns is with the regionalisation, as the OCA is a very West Oxford based league. Would it mean that much shorter journeys for us? I guess. I don't know what teams are in the OCA particularly, but if there's many particularly local to us.
I'd say.
So we're a bit concerned, will the regionalisation actually make any difference?
It will make a difference. I can't, without looking at the map and working it out immediately, couldn't say how much, but we would expect to cut out the longer journeys, because no matter how far away they are, you'll be driving past an awful lot of OCA clubs on the way to Wantage. And therefore, if you stop at one of those rather than have to go away to Wantage, we've cut your journey time down. So it won't be reduced for, and we're on the periphery as well, it won't be reduced as much as for those clubs on the periphery as those right in the middle, but it will be reduced overall.
And the more teams we pull in, the better the benefit for everyone. The stronger this would become.
Yeah, I've seen that. I can see the future. Yeah, if we do bring in the 4 counties, then that'd be a massive benefit.
Certainly from the north of the region, yeah, absolutely.
Ashley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick it up from a county board perspective. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Ashley. I'm with Oxfordshire Cricket. From our point of view as Oxfordshire Cricket, this proposal we support from a kind of holistic view of it, in providing the top end, that aspirational cricket, that quality cricket, for those that want to play the game to that level, to reach the highest echelons of the amateur game within our county or within our region and feeding into the home counties. But what this also does provide is that participation element at the lower levels as well. So as Roger and Paul have just discussed from kind of a more Bedfordshire point of view or a more Buckinghamshire point of view, the localisation of it could be a big key to bringing back into their 3rd or 4th 11s into this league. And it's the same for the Oxfordshire clubs, and providing that clarity that no matter what level you're playing at, there is a clear pathway to the top of the game if you are in the position to, are able to, and want to go and do that. What I think a lot of people have talked about here tonight is the first 11s in the top 3 or 4 divisions, but also then taking into consideration the 2nd and 3rd teams that sit lower down. When we're talking about the 2nd and 3rd teams, they do tend to change and can change quite drastically year on year, whether that's juniors coming up through the game, your 13, 14, 15-year-olds coming new into senior cricket, and progressing quite quickly into the 2nds, into the 1st and up and beyond. But also those that are at the other end of their cricketing career or amateur cricketing career who just want to play some localised games, enjoy still a competitive game, but still play locally, and also therefore support and help the juniors within their club to move up through the ranks. I think there's a number of different things to take into consideration there, but I just wanted to pick it up from a county board perspective, and just say that the discussions we've had with the Cherwell League through this process, and also with the OCA, we are in support of this joining of leagues. The structure, there is a debate at where that balance point happens between participation and performance effectively. Because also as a county board, we do want to see as many people playing cricket as possible, but we also want to see the right playing level available to give our players that are coming through our pathway and towards our senior teams the right level for them to improve and continually improve and get the competitive cricket that they need in order to then come and perform well for Oxfordshire and potentially beyond us as Oxfordshire and into the first class game, as we have seen with a handful of them over recent years.
Thank you. Any more for any more? There's a fair few people we haven't heard from. Don't want to make anyone talk that doesn't feel they've got something that hasn't already been said, but if you have got something, Russell Hayes has a hand up.
Yeah, Ian, I don't think I have anything different to add, but just to reinforce what other people have been saying. As a geographical outlier, we're not surprised to hear that we're very much in favour of the regionalisation, but we've got a concern that it's important to maintain the standards at the top end. On the other hand, I think there's an equality question, but I think throwing our cricket open to as many clubs as possible is the right thing to do, and it should be decided on the pitch which level people end up at. And yes, there will be a period of sorting itself out, but that seems the right way to do it rather than maintain parallel structures just for some what would appear to be arbitrary process. Also, very much increasing the stock of umpires, I think, is really important. Certainly one of my biggest headaches is panel umpires, and anything that helps with that, I think, would be improvement. And I think the point about how quickly it can be done, I think we would have had similar concerns about doing it so quickly until we saw what happened this year, and the remarkable changes that were put in place so quickly, and from our perspective, seem to have worked very well. So I think we don't see that as a major risk.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to chip in? I think we've pretty much covered the points that we wanted to make sure we got some feedback on. We're happy if people want to open it out to anywhere else.
Just quickly, Ian, are you capping where second teams can go to in either of the structures?
No.
No.
No. Well, only in the sense that they can't go into the home counties. But,
sure.
No, within the Charwell, we're not proposing to put that into the proposal. So second teams can still progress to Division 1 if they're able to do so.
Okay.
Rupert. You're muted, Rupert. You're on mute. Oh, there we go.
Russell just touched on the umpire situation in terms of panel umpire. Just slight concern regarding that, because current system in the Charwell League, if you don't actually have a panel umpire, you're penalised. Having said that, the guys who are on the panel are giving up a lot of time, and I appreciate that, but it doesn't mean because you're a panel umpire, you would be any better at actually officiating in a game than, say, a club umpire. And the concern would be that, forcing or increasing the number of panel umpire wouldn't necessarily be the right decision. I think they should be an alternative for club umpires who probably just as good and it's got qualifications as well, but doesn't actually want to be sent 30 miles away. They'd rather do their own clubs and support their own club, and at no cost as well. So I think that should be certainly included in some form or other in this discussion you're having with the OCA.
Well, as I said earlier, I think before we can make any decisions about what's compulsory and what's not, we need to understand what the resources are. The outline proposal that we've put in the document that you've got allows for, requires less clubs at this point to provide a panel umpire and be penalised if they don't, and provides for more clubs to be able to use club umpires. We would like, in an ideal world, we would like every game officiated by a neutral, non-playing umpire. But it's not an ideal world. We know that. It's a very difficult thing to do. So at the moment, we have a loose structure within the document, which relaxes the requirement on clubs in the sense of providing panel umpires, but perhaps with a little more stress on them providing non-playing umpires. However, as I said, once we've got a more realistic view of what resources are available, would be when we would fill in the detail. We don't want to put any onerous obligations on clubs if we can avoid it. But at the same time, particularly at the higher level, I think qualified neutral umpires in divisions 1, 2, and 3, I think is a reasonable requirement. But coming further down the leagues, we understand that there might be a need for a little more flexibility. And whilst we might insist on qualified, we may not necessarily insist on neutral or panel based. But as I say, once we have the resources, it will be down to Nielsen and Ian Royal to sit down and tell us, right, this is what we've got, this is what we think we can do. Now let's set a structure around that that works for everyone. But your point is well made and well noted. Okay, well, I don't want to drag this out any longer than it has to be. If everyone's happy that they've been able to get any answers they wanted or make any points that they wanted, what we would like to get from you in the first instance is, and as I say, these two things are not necessarily interdependent, but or we would like them not to be interdependent. We would like to get a consensus on whether clubs feel that they would like the committee to continue its discussions with the OCA with a view to opening the doors of the Cherwell League to the entirety of the OCA. And I've worded that quite carefully. You'll note the word merger never crossed my lips. So probably the easiest way to do this is just to go around one at a time and ask for a yay or a nay or a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Or as one person said last night, well, I couldn't quite make the mind up and ended up thumbs up. But so if it's all right with you, I'll just go down the list as I've got them on my computer, because that'll make it easier for me to find. And if you could just give us a verbal yay, nay, and preferably not much longer than that, that would be great. So can I start with Julian at Horley?
It's a yes.
Yeah, thank you. Will at Horsebath. I can't see. Okay, Dave says he can see yes. Simon at Kingston Bagdies.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Dan at Leighton Buzzard.
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Paul at Long Marston.
I think we're a maybe.
A maybe. Okay. Tim at Minster Level. Sorry, you were muted. Give me a
Yes.
yes. Thank you. Andy at Nondies. Thank you. Rupert at Oxford.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks. Tom at Oxford Downs.
Yes.
Thank you. Simon at Sanford.
Yes.
Thank you. Russell at Shipton.
Yes.
Thank you. Trevor at Stokenchurch.
Yes.
Thank you. Sally at Tame.
Yes.
Thank you. Richard at Westbury.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you. Ben at Whitney Mills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Roger, I've already marked you in.
Yes.
Thank you. John Rolfe at Bledlow Ridge.
Do I have a choice?
Well, what did I tell you to say?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie at Bledlow Village.
Yeah.
Thank you. Adrian at Buckingham.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lee at Great Brick Hill.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 19 and a half, which is good work.
And Leslie?
Oh, sorry, Leslie at Tiddington. Yeah. Where are you? Can I see you? Is she still here or is she gone?
She's thumbs up.
She thumbs up. Good. Sorry, you got on my other screen, Leslie. Sorry. Excellent. Okay, now the other one is a preference on how the top three would be structured. Now, as we said earlier, this is very much a Cherwell League thing because there will be no impact on this from OCA clubs because we wouldn't anticipate any. Well, there would not be any OCA clubs in the top 30. And I would also stress this is not going to provide a binding vote. It's to give us an idea of the swell of opinion across the clubs. And we've got yesterday's, and we'll add that to today's, and that will give us a guiding point to go forward. All I would say is if the structure was not the one that you prefer, and that is enough for you to say we won't vote for it, can you tell us that as well, please? So I'm going to go down in the same order. So Julian at Horley.
The original proposal.
Original. Okay, thank you. Will at Horseback.
Yeah, same.
Same. Just so we're clear, original proposal is the first one that we put, which is 1, 2A, 2B. The alternative proposal is 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Sorry, my fault. Second one, please.
I did sort of think that might be the case. Not preempting in any way, shape, or form, but and you see how honest we are with this. I could have just logged your vote there and then waited for you to get hung when you got back to the club. Simon at Kingston Bagviews.
The original, and you asked me to comment. I'd have to take it back to for a further discussion. That's the brief I've got. If it wasn't that one.
Dan at Leighton Buzzard.
The original.
Original, thank you. Paul at Long Marston.
We'd go for option 2, the 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. Tim at Minster Level.
Alternative.
Alternative, thank you. Andy at Nondies.
We go for the original one, but if the alternative one's voted for, it wouldn't be a problem.
It would or it wouldn't?
Wouldn't.
Wouldn't. Okay, thank you. Rupert?
Original.
Original. Thank you. Tom at Downs.
I don't think we've got any particular preference.
Okay. Simon at Sanford.
The alternative.
Alternative. Russell at Shipton.
Marginal preference for the alternative, but it wouldn't be a showstopper either way.
Okay. Thank you. Trevor at Stoke Church.
The alternative.
Okay. Sally?
The alternative.
Richard Treble?
The alternative.
Okay. Ben at Whitney Mills?
The alternative.
Okay. Roger? You're on mute, Roger. You're muted.
I think we would slightly favour the alternative, but it's not dying a ditch, and we'd have to have quite a lot of discussion, I think.
Okay. Mr. Rolfe?
Yeah, we'll go with the original, but we'd accept either.
Okay. Charlie Downs?
The alternative, we would have quite a strong preference for that.
Okay.
So we'd have to go back further if it was anything different.
Adrian?
It's a very strong preference for the alternative.
Okay, thank you. Lee at Great Bickerel?
The original proposal, but either would be fine with us.
Okay. And Leslie at Tiddington?
Alternative.
Okay. And the only other one was that one club couldn't make it tonight, but I've got their information. Okay. Listen, firstly, thank you very much for taking the time to come in. Thank you also for a good constructive conversation. We are available to you at any point. If you have further ideas, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, any points you'd like to make, please just forward them onto the Secretary's account and I'll make sure they get round the whole committee in good time. We will progress now to speak again with the OCA. They are a little behind us on the timeline, but not far. But initial discussions were that really we had to be sure that the Cherwell League was happy to open its doors before it was worth them really ploughing into it too hard. And we can now go back to them and say, look, you will be made very welcome at the Cherwell League, and I think that will help their case. And we will keep you informed as things develop, and if we need to do anything else. Adrian.
Just quickly before you go, that was roughly 2-1 for the alternative. How was it yesterday?
It was a little more even.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. It was roughly 2-1-ish. Yeah. But I think what's clear is there are one or two people would have to go back if it didn't go the right way. But in most cases, I think people are prepared to accept either. I've made a note where people have said it's an issue and would have to discuss further. And I think unless you've got anything else that you want to bring up, which I'm more than happy to do, I'm going to end the party now before the police come around to break it up. All good?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
And
Bye.
we'll be in touch.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.